socialize with students. With that, I'd like to end this part of my address and look forward to another part of where I can share more insights with you. But thank you very much for inviting me here, and thank you so much for being such a gracious audience. Thank you.
So I apologize, but I really look forward for your sessions during the panel discussion. Dr. Shishir Nanjaya, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence and also with your inspiring us. We look forward to your session later during the panel discussion. As a token of gratitude, I kindly request the head of the department to handle the moment of Dr. Shishir Nanjaya, the Chief Justice of the function. Our guest of honor, a visionary leader and a committed institution builder, Dr. M.S. Murthy, the Vice Chancellor of NICO University. Under his leadership, the university has witnessed remarkable growth.
Esteemed Chief Guest of this international conference, Dr. Shishir Nanjaya, my colleagues, Dr. B.V. Sara, Dr. Nisha, Dr. Nisra, many distinguished speakers who are going to address you all, including Professor me. I find many of my good friends from media here, delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Professor Shishir Nanjaya must have been enough line in this platform only. In the inauguration, sorry, because for me, I think that was cut short and we are going for an elaborate presentation later. But it is said that a very effective professor is one who is going to say what is going to say, then say, then finally say what he has said. Yes, what he has done, he has said what he is going to say. But I am sure what he is going to say is going to be more interesting. Please calculate this thing. Thank you for doing that. It would have been a great issue for me also. But sometimes in our administrative life, it shows how when you are in program, someone else will call and say whether you are coming here or not. So I am extremely sorry about that. Thought leaders and action leaders who are from the field of media here are going to interact with you. And I'm very happy that as a learning organization, our university has a advantage of bringing in many powerful minds, making them accessible to students, and we move forward as a university in ensuring that we develop a student-centric academic process wherein the students stand benefited all the time. Our aim is to ensure that whatever our professors preach are something that are being practiced, and that's why I'm very happy that the Institution Innovation Council, the 40th program of the Institution Innovation Council, which is very active, and the Institute of Communication is on a theme which is very relevant, that is navigating the digital age, the media's evolving role in a connected world. The kind of world we are living today, it is so very complicated for someone like me with gray hair. You know, we understand that a small tweet or a small video clip, or even for that matter a small hashtag, what comes under that, creates such a difference in the world, and creates so much of chaos key is the more wisdom is to search for in that search. And from that, the weekly magazines, the daily newspapers, to the real time tweets, hashtags, and video clips that are being circulated on the social media. That's something which should be very careful. It should be carefully understood. And this kind of the conferences are very much required to ensure that these are being very well made of social and social life. I'm extremely happy for this program. Thank you, our Nesra and Anish for having organized this event. And I wish that all of you will have a wonderful time during this 2-day international conference. I wish you all the very best.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you joining us. I request Dr. Nisada, the leader of IIC, to hand over to gratitude to our Vice Chancellor. Moving on, I'm thrilled to announce the release of the book, significant new contribution to interdisciplinary scholarship, neuroscience and media, by Dr. K. Pradeep and Dr. Akshay. I would also like to take this opportunity to all know that the authors of the book are the professors of the Institute of Communication. This thought-provoking volume spans 8 chapters, exploring the deep connection between the human brain and the media, from cinematic to social media, and from video game immersion to the effects of animated content on young minds. It covers how media shapes our thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. These authors, both pioneers in neurocinematic media cognition, offered a fresh perspective that blends cognitive neuroscience with media study, making this book a must-read for educators, researchers, creators, and anyone curious about the mind and media connection. Now, I request the dignitaries to officially launch neuroscience and the media. I also request the authors of the book, Pradeep and Dr. Akshay, to join the dignitaries. Due to prior commitments, unfortunately, the Vice Chancellor has to leave the venue. Can you all rise as a matter of respect? Thank you. Congratulations to the authors, Dr. Pradeep and Dr. Akshay. The success of any event mainly lies in the support and contribution of everyone I thank all my dear students and NICO whose enthusiasm, commitment, and hard work are back in this conference. Thank you once again for all the contributions and presence. Looking forward for the next 2 days of meaningful dialogue, collaboration, and learning. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Let me acknowledge your tireless efforts, unwavering commitment, and meticulous attention to detail, which has been invaluable of this conference. With this, we formally conclude the year session. We look forward to engaging sessions ahead. We hope this conference sparks meaningful discussion and collaboration. We request all of you to remain seated as we proceed. As note addressed by Dr. Pallavi by joining us virtually from Townsend University, Maryland, USA. I kindly request Ms. Sandra, Research Scholar, to introduce our keynote speaker. Good morning, everyone. It is an absolute honor and privilege to introduce our keynote speaker of today's conference, Dr. Pallavi Guha, an associate professor of journalism at Towson University and the leading voice in the field of gender, media, and activism. Dr. Guha is the author of the critically acclaimed book, Clear #MeToo India, News, Social Media, Anti-Rape and Sexual Harassment Activism, published by Rutgers University Press. The book has received widespread praise from leading platforms, including Miss Magazine, Cultural Sociology, and the International Journal of Communication, with a strong focus on anti-rape and sexual harassment movement and sexual social media influence and social media influence and central for her scholarly excellence. She was awarded the prestigious NICO White Service Designation Award for Best PhD Designation in Mass Beyond Academia. Dr. Yoha brings a rich professional background as a former journalist with BBC News and the News. She currently serves as a research stakeholder for President Biden's White House task force to address online harassment and is actively engaged in initiatives that empower young women. Dr. Guha was recently recognized as the Center for Community News Faculty Champion awarded by the Right Foundation and received honors from the Solutions Journalism Network and Digital Ethics Futures Consortium for her contributions to inclusive media education and student education. It is truly an honor to have Dr. Guha with us, who will be joining virtually. Before we begin the session, we also have the moderator of today's session, Mr. Srinivasan, former senior correspondent, The Times of India and The Times of Integrated Learning. He is also the guest faculty at NITE Institute of Communication and a personality development facilitator for school and college students. We are truly honored to have you with us today as the moderator for the session on the conference theme, Media's Evolving Role in Connected World. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, everybody. And without further ado, I know you are waiting to
Thank you so much, and a very good morning. Am I audible? Can everyone hear me? Because I can't see you from here. But can you hear me well? Okay, thank you so much. And if I don't have the capacity to share my slides, so if you could share my slides, that would be very helpful. And I can just say next slide, and you can just move the slides. Would that be okay? Okay. Okay, so ready when you have my slides up.
Madam, we are ready.
Oh,
So,
ready? Oh, I didn't hear you. Okay, thank you so much. A very good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Pallavi Guha. I'm the author of Here Hashtag Me Too in India and an associate professor of journalism at Towson University. I want to start by thanking Professor Dr. P.V. Satyaprasad, Chair and Head of Department of Mass Communication and Journalism at NITI University of Communication, Dr. Archun Mitra. We have been collaborating and communicating for the past year now on various issues. The wonderful introduction by the moderator, Mr. Nitin, and all of you here for organizing this very timely conference and having me here. So I'm looking forward to this conversation with all of you. You already know about my biography, but very briefly, I want to share that I research and teach about journalism, social media, communication, Gen AI, and gender, and that's a mouthful. And a lot of my teaching as well as my research comes from my experience of being a former journalist, and I spent several years in India as well, and I worked for the Times of India there as well. But before we get started, I just want to acknowledge and just kind of observe very briefly to pay my respect to the victims of the terrorist attack that happened in India recently, a couple of days ago. My thoughts are with all of you there, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. Moving on, in this talk today, I will be discussing about the growing impact of generative AI tools on mass communication education and how it is impacting the industry, and showcase various ways that we can empower our students to responsibly and ethically use and integrate generative AI based skills in education to prepare our students for the industry. Oftentimes, students lack mentorship and guidance in the industry. So it kind of makes us more responsible educators to prepare them with these newer skills. And when they're not prepared, it puts them at a disadvantage in learning them. There was a recent survey that was done in the US, which asked employers that what kind of skills you want new graduates to be aware of. And other than communication, generative AI skill was also, top there. So learning generative AI skills prepares them for the industry, especially the industry which is already using it. So we have seen an evolution of all these different kinds of tools in the industry. So it's imperative that we start using it as well. So next slide, please. I wanted to share this ad of Claude AI. Claude AI is also a generative AI tool. And the reason I wanted to share it, I was in DC. I'm not very far from Washington, DC, and I was driving by and I was at a stop sign and I took this picture. This is of a billboard near a tall building just to showcase that no matter how much we move online and we have different virtual tools, there will always be space in traditional media for campaign and branding to increase engagement with audience. I thought this is a perfect example to show convergence, that using traditional platforms or spaces to promote newer tools that the industry is using. And as I was, preparing for this keynote today, I also came across, and next slide, please, that the government of India wants to expand this AI skill across different levels. So the government of India has been investing in education to prepare new graduates, undergraduates, PhDs, as well as graduates in different graduate programs to get prepared with these skill sets so that it could be used across different disciplines and different industries. So, different disciplines and industries have been accommodating and embracing generative AI tools in various ways. But there's one common theme across all industries, that is the responsible and ethical use of generative AI tools. And I'm going to discuss more about that moving forward. Next slide, please. And in the next slide, it is kind of divided in two parts. So I hope the first part that you can see is a GIF from the Friends where Ross is seen pivoting a couch, and I often use this to make my point. What has been my approach in using generative AI from 2023 until now? And if you click on the slide again, there will be three columns which shows the different ways I have been mirroring the industry use of generative AI from 2023 until now. So in 2023, when generative AIs, they were fairly new, they were kind of being forbidden to use in classrooms as well as in the industries. So in 2023, the news industry was still trying to figure out what is this new technology about? What does it mean for news gathering? What does it mean for best practices, for copyright, and so on? So the default was don't use generative AI, and how not to use it, to show why not to use it. For instance, when you would review a prompt generated paper, there would be full of hallucinated information, inaccuracies, wrong citations, wrong links, like links to papers which did not which did not exist, and so on. So that kind of led me to discuss why not use it and the various ethical framework of generative AI platforms, a kind of not following copyright processes as well. Now, come 2024, in the middle column, as you can see, news industries started to embrace generative AI tools. So they got into several of these agreements with OpenAI, several news organizations, and they started using the tools for for various skill set and activities. Some would be for multimedia content production, for business uses, for textual content production, for backend, for a lot of backend work like metadata analysis, or even copywriting, and so on. So that inspired me to kind of start using the same way in my classroom after restricting it for over a year. So I started using generative AI for image creation. I run a newsroom through my with my students, and we always do not have the capacity to include images or include photographs. So we started using generative AI images in the stories. That was also the platforms were also helpful in reviewing style guide. For instance, we follow the AP style guide, so kind of how whether it is whether the stories that the students have written, whether they are following the AP style, whether they, if there are any punctuation or other kind of proofing errors or copywriting errors, and we would use it. It would also be used to create headlines. And I'm going to come to Canva in a little bit. So yes, generative AI definitely has both benefits and challenges. That is why it is critical for us, media educators, to prepare our students about the ethical use of AI. So one thing that I keep kind of, going back in my classroom and even in research is to talk about the ethical use. There's another tool, Canva AI, and that is very helpful in creating infographics or creating brand campaign. And again, we embraced that in our classes because creative agencies were now using these tools to create their brand campaign. PR agencies were using the first draft of press releases to be reviewed and written on generative AI platforms as well. Moving on, this year I've been focusing more on the responsible and ethical use and being more transparent with the audience. The audience wants to know how this tool is being used. So I've included now the use of acknowledgement that this part, the headline was created by generative AI. It was reviewed by generative AI. This image was by generative AI. And sometimes I would also encourage my students to include those prompts. So talking about the responsible use here, there should be additional discussions on generative AI creating stereotypes through images, or even when generative AI creates any kind of other content, and other cyber safety issues as well, which would support the students and prospective mass communication professionals in engaging with the culture of equity and inclusion in the industry as well. Next slide, please. And this is an example of how fast journalism is embracing generative AI. This is from summer of 2024. So, Pulitzer Center, they started offering workshops, intensive workshops, as well as introductory workshops on generative AI reporting, like how to use the tools in reporting and how to report on the industry. So, there's like a whole gamut. And more and more journalism research academies as well as industries, they started doing surveys to understand better how generative AI tools could be purposefully used by journalists and the mass communication industry. For instance, AP did a survey of journalists, and so did Reuters, and at Reuters in association with the with Oxford University, and they came up with the results, what the audience wants and what the industry wants when it comes to use of generative AI in journalism. So moving on, I want to discuss how scaffolding generative AI could be done in storytelling, and much of it is based on my own research that I'm doing on the use of generative AI tools in Indian newsrooms, as well as some of my past research on generative AI to help in having conversation with teenagers in the US. So the first thing that generative AI in storytelling is included is kind of defining broadly what is generative AI. So generative AI is creating new content like text, images, or even music and videos. And every single day, platforms are improving and integrating them within their own systems. For instance, we use a lot of WhatsApp to communicate globally. And I'm sure you have seen that WhatsApp has integrated Meta AI in its system, where you could create any content. You could create an avatar of yourself. You could also create graphics of any event or anything else. So this generation of content, generative AI, it is based on the patterns that is learned from vast data set that is already out there. So it is literally being trained on the data sets that is available there. So because it is being trained on the available data sets, generative AI can a lot of times be biased. It is not intentionally biased, but it simply reflects on the patterns that are found in the data set, which is biased and which it has been trained on. And this is one of the ethical challenge that we often don't discuss in our classrooms or even in the industry. And a lot of times, when in the rush to integrate the tool, we forget about the challenges that exist with this tool. So there are definite uses in storytelling, such as generative AI is used for brainstorming, drafting, revision, and feedback. And while this process goes on, the challenges are quite parallel to it. So previously, if you remember, the generative AI platforms, when they shared, like when they created a draft or created a content, they would not acknowledge where they got the information from. Now if you go to ChatGPT, and if you ask ChatGPT to create a content, there'll be footnotes which says where it got the content from or where it got the information from. And I think that's a great way to acknowledge on which content, which data set it is being trained on. So that's a big part of it. Some of the other challenges are other than ethical bias and copyright is hallucinations. Generative AI platforms are known to hallucinate, and sometimes again it is known to hallucinate because it is a system which needs to be constantly trained. And I had a conversation with a journalist some weeks ago, and the journalist told me that the journalist was reviewing their copy on a generative AI platform, and the generative AI platform constantly, corrected the copy of the name of a political leader who had lost the elections. And it just kept on correcting the copy to the person who had lost the elections, who was in the seat of power before. And the person said that generative AI, if not checked or handled by humans, they could, create inaccurate information. So checking and rechecking is very important. Yes, generative AI platforms can help in the back end and help in efficiency, but it cannot replace the human touch and context for to make things and information presented in an accurate way. Next slide, please. Is the next slide on challenges? I hope it's on challenges. The next slide. Um, can someone confirm that to me, please? So the next slide is, if you can see it, it's on challenges. And There are two challenges that I specifically want to discuss today. One is of bias, the other one is of misinformation. And if you click on the slide, then there are two prompts that I used to create two images. I gave a prompt. This is to showcase how bias exists. Create an image of an Indian dancer. I did not specifically say what gender the dancer has to be. I did not say what form of dance it has to be. And if you click, and I hope that you can see on your screens there, it generated an image of a classical Indian dancer. And if you look at the image, it looks very realistic. but it is also something that it shows that there are inherent biases. Again, when you talk about an answer, then it automatically shows you a female answer. Similarly, if you click again, there is a prompt that I've shared on the screen: create an image of an Indian entrepreneur. And I did not say what the gender of the entrepreneur is, but it automatically created the image of a male entrepreneur. So generative AI is not sacrosanct, so use it with caution. And these examples shows that because there are inherent biases in the system, they need to be checked and rechecked. I had a fruitful conversation with someone in the industry, mass communication industry in India, and the individual said that Gen AI tools are like an integrated version of search engine, social media, and other efficiency tools, which just helps to reduce all the work that happens at the back end of journalism. For instance, transcription. You are interviewing someone. Previously, we would spend hours transcribing or translating, but now those work have been cut down. But writing the story still needs a human context. Okay, next slide, please. I see generative AI as a bridge between coding and social sciences from a research perspective in the media industry. It serves as a bridge because it helps in automating code generation, annotation, etc. Everything that us social scientists, non coding social scientists at least, we are not very comfortable doing. So there are these large data sets of documents which need to be reviewed. And generative AI helps in that review of those documents. It makes things more accessible. It also enables a lot of sophisticated data analysis and enhances our learning through dissemination. So it breaks those barriers which had prevented journalists before into going into data journalism or showcasing their work only using data. So they had to be dependent on others, or kind of they had to have a more sophisticated understanding. So generative AI is helping breaking those barriers. So three things here that I want to focus on is making data as well as making learning more accessible, also making dissemination more accessible. And I want to give one example here. There are oftentimes news stories which are published with four key summaries up top. It is for better audience engagement, and it is clearly labeled that the summary of the story has been AI has been generated through AI tools. So if the audience does not have the time to go over the entire story, at least they will have some time to look over the key summary or key points of the story, news story out there. And similarly, very same for data analysis and graphic designing as well. I read India Today quite a bit, and I've been noticing that several of their graphics have been created by generative AI, and then they acknowledge it below as well. And finally, accuracy is key. Whatever the generative AI platforms are creating, it needs to be verifiable by human sources, verifiable by journalists or content creators, and only then disseminating it to the public so that misinformation or inaccurate information is not provided to the public. Some of the other examples I want to share, I've been focusing a lot on journalism, but some of the other examples of how mass comm industry uses generative AI is, in copy editing, in PR, in press, writing press releases, writing in different languages, creating podcasts for marketing and PR. Generative AI tools have been very helpful recently, and in advertising, predictive behavior analysis, and then kind of also creating brand campaigns and so on. And content creation is more for creating captions when you're creating YouTube videos or other kind of videos to promote any content. So generative AI becomes quite handy there as well. So I've kind of shown here how discussed here how generative AI has challenges, how it is being used in the industry. I will briefly connect it with how and show you some examples of how my classes are using it, and then we will move on to taking questions. So these next slide, please. And the next slide where it says connecting with teaching. Okay, so the slide on connecting with teaching, there are two, two brief brief ideas around how I've been using generative AI. So, in my journalism course, I encourage my students to evaluate all their stories for accuracy, completeness, taste, readability, and AP style. AP style is what we use in our news stories. So, initially, it was optional, now it is mandatory. What it does, it cuts down on on the different errors like capitalization or other errors, or how AP style should be incorporated. In my other mass comm course, where they create content visualization and infographics, they use current events to generate new ideas, and then they use Canva AI to create those to make it more succinct, kind of showing evaluating the first draft, and then doing prompt engineering on how it could be made better for audience specific, say for 18 years to 22 years. So summarizing the points more as well. And I wanted to, next slide please, share the note. The next slide, you can see that there is a note on AI use where I clarify you can use Copilot to proofread, AP check, but do not use it to write your story. And then the next slide is going to show you what and how my students have generated. As you can see that there is a screenshot of a news article where the image and the headline were created by Copilot, and then they acknowledge it in their story as well, which is very important. So this is the kind of the industry, how we are embracing the industry best practices in our classroom, but also in terms of research. Next slide please, which says mass comm assignment. There's a note there you would see. You must acknowledge the use of generative AI for these assignments. Read APA 7. APA 7 is used in scholarship writing for citations. So APA 7 now acknowledges the use of AI in various types of, whether content creation or even data analysis. And in this assignment, I encourage my students to do a before and after, use free image generator, and then create a graphic for no more than 30 words on each visualization, and being in inclusive representation of all the images. And this kind of helped them quite a bit, because they did it at least 5 times to come to the image that they really wanted to use. So we can skip over the next couple of slides. These are some of the examples that I wanted to show, how my students used different kinds of visualization. So all the befores and afters. So if we can go to the slide on the key takeaways. The key takeaways of this impact of the evolution of generative AI in both mass comm classrooms as well as the industry is that embracing tools are very important, because these tools are everywhere now, but we must recognize the ethical challenges that comes with these tools. So there has to be a strategy for use, and all of these surveys that I was mentioning a little while ago, in all of these strategies, one thing is mentioned, that oversight is key. Human oversight is key. So, transparency and human oversight can only be possible when we are responsibly using all of these tools. So the audience should also know when and how generative AI is being used at, what context. Like, are you using it to create headlines? Are you using it to create images? How are you using it? So that is important to create trust with your audience, and trust within the media systems as well. Ensuring that AI systems comply with data privacy, that's been a huge problem, and data privacy regulations. And that helps in, again, building trust too. So remembering that, skilling and reskilling is important through education, because it helps them to prepare for the industry. So the graduates at NITI University who are taking a step forward in including generative AI, I hope in your curriculum will have an edge over others, because they'll be skilled in the tool already. And reskilling is important for people who are already in the field. So learning through this platform, through different workshops and so on, that would only help them in increasing inclusivity and accessibility in their story. And finally, I would just want to say that editorial oversight and AI literacy are key to maintain the credibility of journalism and the mass comm industry as a whole. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to leave with this thought that generative AI is a tool for collaboration, not a replacement of human context. And next slide, please. Thank you so much. I've had a wonderful time presenting this, and I'm looking forward to having conversations with all of you here and taking more questions. So I can hear you if anyone from the audience or any of you have questions. I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you now. I'm sorry, I can't see anyone, but I can only hear you. Right, right. Mhm, mhm. Mm, that's a very tricky question, but thank you so much for asking that question. I would say that generative AI is making people who are not creative creative. I hope so. That it is encouraging people to put on their creative hats. And I'll give you an example. from what I see in my classrooms. So before I made generative AI mandatory, my students would sometimes, skip including images. They wouldn't take, photographs, images. They would just skip it. But now I made it mandatory, so now they're being forced to use those images. They are being forced to use the tool. So instead of going out and taking those images, so I would say that. Uh, it is forcing people who would otherwise not be creative to put on a creative hat. Mhm. Absolutely. I can hear you well. Sorry, I can't see you. Maybe next time. Mhm. Sure. Hmm. Hmm. No, that's a very in-depth question, and thank you so much for your question. I like how you have presented the algorithmic majoritarianism, and there is rather a concept to it, like because most of these systems have been created in the global north, there is an algorithmic majoritarianism bias, whatever you want to call it, and in how it depicts certain cultures and certain pictures and images as well as words in other parts of the world. I would take a step forward and call it more like confirmation bias. Confirmation bias of the systems, because we are training people who are training these platforms. They are not without their own biases as well, right? And it is the different content that they are using to train these system. It comes from their confirmation bias. So I want to take it to a little bit of a different direction and say that um, the the people who are engaged in creating these platforms and training the LLMs, the large language models, they have their own confirmation bias, in kind of tendency to search for, interpret, or recall information that is based on their value system. So I would say that what we see is how it is being interpreted is a result of the confirmation bias of the folks who are training these different platforms. But I do like the idea of algorithmic majoritarianism, and I would at least brainstorm later more on that. But thank you for your question. Sure. Yes, yes, Professor. Carry on. Mm-hmm. 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 I agree. And it's a very timely question. And I say that because I'm on a task force myself for publishing and research and publication. And we have been meeting for the past 6 months with different editorial board members of different journals. And I spoke with several because we are part of the task force, what is acceptable and what is not. And all the editors said one thing in common: writing, like using generative AI to write a research article, is not acceptable. But you can use it to, for instance, do data analysis. Like, in my presentation, I showed that how coding is not for all non-coder social scientists. So if you use generative AI to do sentiment analysis and then acknowledged it, that is fine. But if you use generative AI to write your entire paper, that means you are not doing the research or writing the paper. It is the tool that is doing it. And again, when the tool does it, there are minor things you can make out, that it is written by generative AI. And I would say one thing is using a lot of apostrophe S's or using dashes, long sentences. Those are all the telltale signs that it has been completely written by generative AI. So as I said, that it could be used for efficiency, like transcribing. We spend so much time transcribing our interviews with our participants, but using AI would be so much helpful, but not analyzing and writing the entire paper. I hope that was a useful answer. Mm-hmm. Morning. Mm-hmm. Sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Right. Right. I hear your concerns, and I'm there with you. And thank you for sharing it. Your experience of being a sub editor. It reminded me of my time of spending sleepless nights and doing night shifts as well. But here is what I would say. There are newsrooms right now in India which have made use of AI mandatory, but not to write the news, but rather to refine the news, and rather to, kind of proofread. And for assignments, as you point out, that students using different AI tools and platforms to write their